Hi, I'm Jason Miller, Executive Editor for Federal News Radio, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our webinar, a 360-degree view of federal network security brought to you by Brocade. Before we begin, we'd like you to answer a few polling questions for our speakers, and then they can fine-tune their remarks. Please indicate your choices on the following questions, and we'll get started shortly. Today's discussion will be presented in 4 sections, since we're coordinating for radio broadcast on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. Before we get started with the webinar, let me set a little context for our discussion. It's been 11 months since the federal employees and contractors have learned about the massive data breach impacting the Office of Personnel Management. Since then, the federal community has seen a 30-day cyber sprint, which turned into a long-term cybersecurity national action plan. And now the Obama administration is attacking the government's cybersecurity problem by modernizing legacy systems that put agencies at more risk and cost more to maintain. In April, the White House sent its legislative proposal to Capitol Hill to create a $3.1 billion IT modernization fund where the leading rationale is cybersecurity. Minority Whip Steny Hoyer introduced the bill based on that proposal, and so begins the dance to see if Congress will support the Obama administration's plan to modernize federal IT. In the meantime, agencies can't sit still and wait to see what happens. The Office of Management and Budget wants to get them moving in a specific direction, investing less on legacy systems and more on new or modernized systems. OMB wants agencies to look to the cloud, use shared services, and reuse existing software code. In fact, market research firm IDC estimates agencies will spend more than $6.7 billion on cloud computing in fiscal 2016. IDC also believes cloud could represent as much as 50% of the overall federal IT budget by 2018. At the same time, federal cybersecurity initiatives are maturing. The Homeland Security Department's Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, or CDM program, the Einstein tools, and new information sharing capabilities are making agencies more aware of threats they face. It's also giving them more data to make decisions more quickly about how to mitigate and protect their networks and data. DHS also has launched a new penetration testing service for agencies to help them understand the vulnerabilities in their networks and how to prevent hackers from exploiting them. But while all these tools and initiatives help, the real change that has to happen is how agencies view their networks. The government is slowly moving to a risk-based framework. For instance, OMB is close to finalizing 2 documents, Circular A130 and Circular A123. Both will require the protection and buying of IT systems in a new way, where agencies will have to prioritize data and applications on the front end. Better cybersecurity also has to be about buying systems and applications where security is part of the development up front. The General Services Administration, for example, is reviewing industry responses to a request for information about cybersecurity services. This could lead to new ways to buy cybersecurity services. Meanwhile, federal leaders are preaching the move to agile or iterative development for applications, and that also begins with discussions with the user and about cybersecurity. As we've heard many times over the years, there is no magic bullet. There's no one thing that will change the conversation. It's a sustained effort from top to bottom of any organization that will lead the agencies from using old, risky systems to new, secure, user-focused applications. Over the next hour, we will draw upon government experts to explore how best to integrate network security into an overall modernization plan. We'll talk about the techniques, the tools, and the capabilities to secure federal networks. With that context in place, let's get started with our discussion. Welcome to the discussion. Our guests today are Frank Konechny, the Chief Technology Officer at the Air Force, Christine Calvosa, the Deputy CIO for Resiliency at the Federal Communications Commission, Jennifer Kron, the Deputy CIO for the Intelligence Community, Anthony Robbins, Vice President of Federal for Brocade, and Judson Walker, the Director of Systems Engineering for Brocade. Welcome to our discussion today.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason.
Now, this is a hot topic right now. We have cybersecurity, we have IT modernization. Both things are being put together by the White House in Congress as one and the same, as the sides of the same coin or different sides of the same coin. So let me just start. I'm going to start this side, the long side of the table with Frank in a little bit. Air Force has a big lift, right? So you have a lot of systems, a lot of networks you have to improve, and then you also have the cyber mission. So talk a little bit about how you guys are going down that path with network modernization and cybersecurity.
Well, first of all, we have to realize that we've had network security for a long time through the Air Force gateways. There were 16 of them, and we established those to put a perimeter around all of the Air Force domain. Now we have the JRSS stack, which is the new DoD version of the gateway. And the JRSS is going to take care of a lot of the network security issues that we have as part of the cybersecurity. Because we use it now for email traffic, cleansing email, as well as looking for signatures that would be relevant to attacks that we already have. So as we progress down the path, when we talk about network modernization, JRSS is a big deal for that network modernization, both the SIPR and NIPR side, as well as when we look at the bases. The bases, we're going to be modernizing those also to support traffic going to more likely to the CDCs now as we move the applications more to a centralized location.
Now, is there a big difference between what JRSS and the gateway, and then when you lay it, put on top of it for the network modernization piece too?
It's the same kind of philosophy behind it.
Yeah.
It's a prevention of intrusion detection, looking at intrusion detection, DPAC inspection at times, depending on if you're going in or out of it. Also with the internet access point adjacent to it, it's another way of looking at perimeter security from the internet side as well.
Jennifer, within the intelligence community, you have the big program called iSight. Talk just a little bit about what that is, and then talk about how that also fits into this conversation of network modernization and cybersecurity.
In the intelligence community, ensuring the security of our networks within the framework of overall cybersecurity is an essential part of the IC information technology enterprise, as you noted, called iSight, which has been underway in the IC since 2012. Historically, in the intelligence community, the 17 different entities that comprise the community have all had their own IT networks, their own security, and their own systems. These didn't talk to each other, which inhibited integration. Security measures varied significantly across the enterprise, which created vulnerabilities for everybody. And this disjointed approach was, of course, hugely inefficient. So since 2012, we've been executing the largest IT transformation in the history of the intelligence community, called iSight. It's focused on greater integration, greater information sharing, and improved information safeguarding through a cloud-based, common intelligence community IT approach. This approach is based on enterprise services, so services are provided by one agency or by a consortium of agencies made available to the entire intelligence community for use by all. To ensure consistent network and cybersecurity in this new paradigm, we're developing standard network design models, identifying core security requirements for all network designers, and establishing information security continuous monitoring across the entirety of the IC.
Now, without a doubt, cybersecurity is one of the most important pieces to all of us here, but we can add an extra check for the intelligence community. When you look at your network modernization, you look at cybersecurity, and you do the layers, how do you ensure that you're not sacrificing one for the other? Because that's always a concern. Do we do too much cybersecurity and that hurts our modernization efforts, or too much modernization and then maybe we're not quite ready from the security piece?
For us, fortunately, what we've found is that they're not competing. It's not a zero-sum game. They really are working together. The new enterprise solution that we're approaching, so the benefits are it improves our mission capabilities by improving integration, first of all, but it's both more efficient and more secure. Because previously, with every agency on its own, entity on its own, the standards varied widely. So now that we are able to establish common standards across, that's more secure. It's also more efficient at the same time. So for us, because we don't really do trade-offs in terms of our managing risk. That's not something that we can do in the intelligence community. If we take any risks with our data or our network security, that can literally be a matter of life and death. So we don't take those risks. We have to make sure that at the same time that we are promoting modernization, we're also ensuring the data security and, of course, protecting civil liberties and personal privacy. So for us, the real challenge is, so we can pursue modernization and efficiency and security all through the same enterprise approach. For us, the real challenge is figuring out how we can do that and promote greater data sharing across different agencies. So the way that we are doing that is to tag the data, tag the people. Ensure that all of the data that's available within the common systems is properly tagged for who is supposed to see it and what circumstances, and the people are also properly tagged so that we can link those two together. So the folks who are supposed to have access to certain information can get access to it and others cannot. The way that we can do this is it's much better through a cloud-based architecture that gives us the ability to provide multiple layers of data protection, from layered encryption to managing data access using methodologies such as attribute-based data access control and multi-factor authentication.
Anthony, Jennifer just did a great brain dump. I mean, there's so much in there. React a little bit to what you've heard so far from both Jennifer and Frank.
I think there's some great points on both sides. I mean, if you go back 20 years, and ironically for us, the year after the founding of our company, in 1996, there was 2,700 websites. Today, there's more than 1 billion. 20 years ago, there was 100 million cell phones. Today, there's 3 billion. So there's been this explosion of data that's sitting on top of these networks. And as Frank and Jennifer talked about, in many cases, this network infrastructure that was designed 20 years ago. Okay. In addition, all of the things that are driving the enterprise of tomorrow, cloud, social, mobility, etc. All of those things came upon us after the architecture and implementation of today's network was put in place. So this conundrum that we have is massive amount of data is traveling across today's networks, okay, for which the federal government is a large producer and consumer of, and a need for modernization of this network infrastructure to get us properly aligned to commercial best practices that relate to this enterprise of tomorrow. So how do we do that? Right, the federal government spends $80 billion a year on information technology, a lot of money, but to many, not enough. So we've got to, as industry, we've got to work on a set of open standards that relate to this modernization of network infrastructure so that we can process this information, secure it, and do it in budget-constrained, resource-constrained environments for our customers.
Justin, you have the title of engineering. I didn't understand half of what Jennifer said, so no, I'm just kidding. Give me a sense, though, from an engineering perspective, when you're looking at the network modernization security piece, how do they fit together?
Oh yeah, Jason, they're definitely cooperative entities based on previous comments, and because of that, the infrastructure has the ability today to provide a level of intelligence that we haven't seen in prior years, where we can actually develop solutions that are built in and not bolted on from a security standpoint, and so we have the ability to secure our environment effectively, end to end, but also provide the level of performance that's required as we look at service delivery to our customers and consumers.
All right, Christine, I'm going to turn to you. Justin brought up the old analogy, built in, not bolted on. I tweeted the other day, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that in a panel discussion, I'd maybe have a lot more money. But talking from the FCC's perspective, you guys just did a big shift to the cloud, that security with network modernization. You just went through this. Talk a little bit about that.
That's a great point from Judson. I mean, I think the one thing for us is the fact that we hope it's not bolted in and it's built in, because we're moving we're modernizing by moving to the cloud. And we're moving to both commercial cloud, we're moving to public cloud, we're moving to private cloud, whatever best meets the needs from an FCC perspective. So what we would hope is that we're working collaboratively to ensure that you meet the standards that we have from an FCC perspective, and that when we go out and ask to modernize an application, that you have already looked at those standards, or that you even have tighter standards than what we have, because I think sometimes industry can do better than what the government is asking for. And so I would hope that we could work collaboratively to be able to modernize much quicker, ensuring that we have modernized not only this network layer, but have a more secure place to put our applications and our data.
Frank, let me come back to the end of the table. You started us off talking about the network and the modernization of the Air Force. When it comes to the capabilities, when you look at the things that you need to do, what is out there that meets your needs? Are there stuff that you're saying to yourself, how can we do this differently? What comes to mind?
We have to look at it the way we view the network now. We view it as a part of the resiliency of the applications of the data. So we talk about, key cyber terrain, as well as the thread that we actually go through particular application mission threads. And so when we talk about data right now and about mission, about network, we want to make sure that the components of our mission threads, which is part network, which is part application, which is part people, in fact, that all those are secure and that we have some resiliency. So what we want to be able to do is look at our mission thread and say, okay, we want the network to respond back to threats that are occurring in this mission thread if it's a high priority. And we want it to be automatic. And that's where it's going to get more interesting as we define those mission threads, especially when we get down to the base level. We're going to have to react to it in a different way than we normally react to it. We just can't say, stop all the traffic, because what we want to be able to do is to actually go through the mission and get through with the mission. And that's the key essential here.
Christine, Frank said your word, resiliency.
Yeah.
How's that play into the network modernization cybersecurity discussion here?
No, I mean, great point by Frank. I think one thing that we would like to do is just as he said, is basically, and Frank said, define mission threads and be able to continue our mission without completely stopping it because we're being attacked. I think one thing that we're definitely looking at is the behavioral aspect of that, right? Both internal and external. And we're hoping that we can catch a lot of that at the forefront. And really when I mean us as catch it is, I'm really, and I wrote a couple things down, but from like a WAN provider or cloud provider perspective, we're hoping that they are helping us catch that at the front end. We are putting measurements at our end and our barriers, but I think a lot of that is going to depend on that, again, collaboration between the cloud provider and the government.
I think that's a fascinating point. We're going to take a break and come back. Maybe we can pick up on that collaboration piece. You're listening to the panel discussion, a 360-degree view of federal network security, sponsored by Brocade on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.